If you're ready to experience more peace and joy in your life, if you want to feel more comfortable in your own skin, and if you're ready to discover and expand on your energetic gifts and personal power, you're in the right place. So here's your host, Kelle Sparta.
Welcome back to Spirit Guides. I'm your host, Kelle Sparta, transformational shaman, spiritual business coach. I'm here as always with my best friend in Boquete, Katherine Loranger. I will never get that right.
That's okay. It's okay. As long as Katherine has a K, I'm happy.
Katherine has a K.
There you go.
And Loranger. And she is also an amazing spiritual business coach. And so together we are badasses. And so it's been a while since we've recorded because I've just been finishing up my retreat, which was the Adventures in Energetics retreat here in Panama. And we had the best time ever. Oh my God, it was so much fun. I got to teach advanced spiritual skills and do a whole bunch of ritual with people. And it was so cool. Everybody is home now and they're all still saying how they feel like they're totally different people now. So that was amazeballs. So I'm going to be prepping for the next retreat here shortly, and I will let you guys know what it is when I decide. Right now, I've got 3 options, and I'm trying to decide between the 3. So anyway, the topic for today is, before I go into that, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, please. We want to make sure that you share this with other people, and that helps us grow and helps keep us motivated to make more content for you. So help us out, and we appreciate you. And if you have questions, please send them in because we love to answer questions. And you can send them to Kelle@kellesparta.com. And that will get your question to me, and then we will review it and answer it on the air for you. So I do answer every question that comes in. So there's no downside to sending them in. Okay.
And there's no dumb questions, right? Like I think sometimes, and we've talked about this, especially in business, there's this perception, or it can feel like everybody else knows what they're doing and I should know this. And that's not true. So there are no like wrong or dumb or silly questions. All questions are good questions.
Yeah. Business, like adulting, is people flying by the seat of their pants and making it up as they go along and learning as they go. So, we all know different things and we all know different amounts of different things. And so don't be afraid to ask. So
and sometimes those things change.
And they always do change these days. Yes, I agree. Okay. So today we are going to talk about using your spirit guides for business and how to work with your metaphysical team in your business. And so I'm excited to talk about this. We actually referenced this in an earlier episode. And speaking of contact from people, someone wrote in and said, hey, you gave great stuff, but you never talked about the metaphysical team in your business. And I was like, oh, crap, we forgot. Thank you for pointing that out. And so we are going to do an entire episode on that. And I'm sad that I don't remember who said that to me. I'm sorry. I should have written it down and I didn't. But thank you. I know you're listening, so thank you. And yes, you rock. Yeah. And so we're gonna talk about that today. We're gonna talk about who are your spirit guides and how are they. I mean, one of the things that happened is I have a friend here in town who is a very insightful spiritual teacher herself. She doesn't market on the web and she doesn't make herself known. She has, a small group of students that she works with, and she and I are friends. And so I'm not going to say her name on air because she's not about promoting herself out into the world. But when my students came, I had her come and talk to them. And the topic that I asked her to speak on was spirit guides, because she had a very interesting view on spirit guides. And I want to share it here because I think it's relevant for this topic, right? And so she is of the opinion that rather than having, just a few spirit guides as a team, that you actually have thousands of spirit guides. And that there are people out there looking to support you energetically, right? Energetic team in a variety of different areas. And that sometimes you have to clear your spirit guides in order to move forward in your life, because sometimes they're holding trauma from you from previous life or from this life. and they're working in that area of your life. And therefore, if you don't clear their trauma and your trauma, you don't move forward. And I thought that was an interesting perspective.
So question here. So could
Yeah.
those spirit guides then be, and that totally makes sense to me. Could they be in the living and in the transcended?
I did not ask her that question, but it feels to me like they could be.
That too, right? Like
Yeah.
you might, and we talk about soul contracts and people come into your life for lessons and learning. So that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so the idea being that, you're working as a team and you need to keep the team going, right? This idea of, I always have this problem when people talk about healing their ancestors, because that sort of reverses the power dynamic in what's appropriate in a relationship, in a family thing, because they are above you in the family hierarchy, right? They gave you life and you can't reverse that dynamic, right? So I always have a little about that. I'm like, yes, clear it from you and then hand it back to them so that they can heal it for themselves. That, to me, is the closest you get to healing your ancestors, because it's not your job, right? But spirit team, I can see that if you guys are on a team, much like if you're working in a team of people, anybody, and I had this experience many years ago. I was working on a startup for a haunted house Renaissance fair theme park. And there was a team of 7 of us who worked on it for a year. We got really far. We were at the attorneys raising money, picked the land, everything. And then the woman who was going to be, she's the one who had experience running the haunt. She melted down. And I saw it coming a year before. I said, I'm only going to do this if you go into therapy, because you will sabotage this at the last minute if you don't. And she assured me that she would go into therapy, and I checked in with her for a few months and she was going, and then I let it go and she stopped going. And she did. She systematically ripped apart the entire thing. She started attacking all of the managers and just ripped the whole thing to shreds. And so that is an example of when you are working with a team. If everybody isn't on board, if everybody hasn't dealt with their trauma, and they can't, like, she couldn't allow herself to be successful. She had a victim state that was very high for her. And so, when you're in this space, if your team, whether it's spiritual or physical, if there's somebody on the team who is crucial to the process and you're partnered with them, right? And they're melting down and they're causing problems, well, that's going to impact the entire process, right? And
yeah. But I think like this is so interesting, because we're going to be talking about, in some of the upcoming episodes, we're going to talk about hiring and that whole process as well. And so I think there's a fine line there between, just being really clear about what is yours to own there, and not going into a codependent, got to fix everybody state.
Correct.
That's not your job, right?
Correct. Which is why I said you're going to have to go to therapy, not I'm going to heal you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was very clear about that, because I'm like, that is inappropriate for me to be in that scenario. However, I knew, I could see what was coming, and I knew if she didn't do therapy, we were going to be screwed, and I didn't follow up enough. But that was a business partnership. So I want to be clear, that's a partnership, not an employee or contractor situation, right? Yeah. That's a very different dynamic. We'll talk about that in the hiring section. But if you are joint venturing with somebody or you are partnering with somebody, you need to understand a partnership is like a marriage. And you need to know that person as well as you know someone in a marriage, because you're going to be financially on the hook for things they do and things like that. And so, this is why I'm more attached to having them do their inner work, right? Because I don't want to be dragged down by what their limiting beliefs are, right? In a partnership.
So kind of coming back to the idea, like we're talking about how to build your metaphysical team and accessing.
Right, and we're going to do that.
Metaphysical team, but that's I think a really interesting concept that the spirit guides, and it might, there might even be a different word for it, but that there are like potentially thousands of souls, either who are currently carnated or still in the non-physical, who are part of your overall experience on this planet. And so part of your work, should you choose, or part of your decision, I guess, is to be in relationship or not in terms of healing and growing with these people.
Right.
I could see where that, somebody could get really bogged down in thinking like there's
Yes.
thousands of people, physical or non-physical, that I've got to like figure out and work with. And for some people, that could be a procrastination thing as well, right?
Yes.
Where you're getting
And
like
so,
stuck in that and not actually moving forward with the needle moving activities in your business.
absolutely. And so I asked her, I was like, wow, that feels overwhelming, right? And I was like, what do you do with that? And she said, well, you take you say, I need this. Who would like to help? And then
Oh.
these people raise their hands and you say, okay, is there anything we need to do to get you ready? Right. And if there's trauma to be cleared or anything like that, then you do that work with them or whatever. And then you task them out. And so
it's kind of like you have like a labor pool. You have like a labor unlimited.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like a temp team, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so I thought that was an interesting concept. I haven't tried it yet, but I think it's an interesting concept. And so, for me, I work with my team and I do my work on myself. I haven't thought about doing any work around my team, partly because we have limiting beliefs in the afterlife a little bit, but not nearly as much.
No.
I mean, they do. Things carry forward from lifetime to lifetime, and those are things that are in our soul that we need to clear, right? But when you are not incarnated, you have a much longer view of the world. You have a much broader vision of how things operate. You have a much more comprehensive understanding of your own divinity and your own creativity and power in the world. Yep. And so a lot of the stuff that shows up in physical form doesn't exist on the astral, right? Yep. And so the only things that would be there would be things that people were carrying forward from past lives that were trauma from those things. Or she was of the opinion that somebody can step in front of, if you are personally experiencing trauma, your team can take the hit for you. And because of that can be trauma that needs to be cleared. And that just, for me, it feels a little complicated, but
that's interesting. Because I think I've had experiences where I've connected to the non-physical in really powerful ways. And the kind of like aha is like when you're at that soul level, when you're in the non-physical, you have these agreements, you have these, I don't like the word contracts, but you have like, you're working together with your soul family, your team, or whatever.
Yeah.
You plan to come to Earth. And there's opportunity to have different experiences, right?
Yeah.
And you might play different parts for each other in order to create an experience for someone's growth or development. And you still have free choice in all of that, right? In what to do with it. But that you don't necessarily understand the why or the what until you're at the non-physical. Then it's like, oh, that's what that was about. Holy crap balls.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And, I was saying that I actually put out a post on Facebook earlier this week where I was saying that, because I got a reminder that we had been flooded out of our apartment 5 years ago. Facebook had said, hey, here's a post from 5 years ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, this was the day we got flooded out of the apartment. And it seemed like a horrible thing at the time. But, 5 years later, I'm looking back and going, well, that triggered this, which triggered that, which triggered that, which created this, which allowed me to be here now. And if that had not happened, none of this would have happened. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so I'm like, yeah. So I was looking back going, if you're going through it right now and things are hard, just know there is a reason. You may not see it for a few years, but you'll see it. Right. Yeah. And so,
And try not to be too attached to the idea that this is really hard or this is a bad thing. Because you don't know. You don't know, right? It's just something you're experiencing, and it's good or bad only so much as you put a label on it or form an attachment to that idea.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, coming back to the metaphysical team concept. So let me talk about how I use my metaphysical team in my business. So, I talk to my spirit guides and I ask them for guidance. And one of the things that I do energetically, and I'm doing this right now, is I have a tendency, because I am a creative thinker and visionary, and this is sort of my thing. And I'm like, let's do this and this and this and this and this, and I start things and whatever. And so one of the things energetically I do is periodically I clear the plates, and I'm doing that right now. I'm shutting down all these things that I started and then didn't do for one reason or another, or didn't happen for one reason or another. I'm shutting everything down right now just to focus the energy of my business in one direction, right? And so that's a super important energetic thing. It's not your team specifically, but it is energetically significant. And then the second thing, I have a thought form that I have created. Now, a thought form is, it's chaos magic. And what you're doing is you're pulling up energy from the chaos realms, undifferentiated chi, right? So chaos not meaning insanity and confusion, but chaos meaning non-ordered energy, right? And you're creating a form of something or someone out of that. And so what I did a few years ago was I pulled up energy and I created a thought form that I call Craig. And Craig was formed on a stockbroker because I wanted someone who would make me money, right? And I was like, stockbrokers make big money, right? Now, I had to think about the archetype of a stockbroker, right? Which often has a lack of moral compass associated with it. And so I had to give him ethics and morals because I wanted him to only do it in an ethical and moral fashion, right? But I left him with I'm going to create money and I'm going to pull money in energy. And, if I think about it now, because I haven't worked on his structure in probably, 8 or 10 years, but I may go back in and reformat a little bit, because as I'm talking about it, I'm like, there's a little bit of energy tweak that needs to happen. I can feel it.
And there's a reason that you're talking about this, right?
Yes, right.
Like that's part of your spirit guides, your metaphysical team, is they're giving you ideas and insights, and right. And so noticing, having that awareness of, well, isn't that interesting that this is coming up? Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so right now I'm realizing that I need to shift it to be more magnetic than aggressive.
Yes.
And that needs to be a thing, right? Yeah. And so, I need to shift his beingness to a magnetic pulling energy, or not pulling, but attracting energy, and less of a energy, right? And that
kind of energy is a scarcity energy.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah.
And at the time I created him, I was in a scarcity space. Yeah. And so, now I'm just like, hey, Craig, go get this. Hey, Craig, go get that. Right. But in the original energy, there was a lack associated, a need instead of welcoming energy. Right. And so that's another piece of the puzzle there. So, but I've created this thought form and I brought him into being. And people are going to say, well, how do you do that? How do you do anything in magic? You intend to do it. You hold a vision until the vision forms and you feel it go solid, and then you're good, right? So I created him and I task him with going out and finding clients. And so that's what he does. You want to talk about how you use your spirit guides? Like about my end of things for a minute?
Yeah. So some of the most profound experiences of my life, and I had one of my mentors said, it's like you've been touched by the hand of God. It's like God reached down, and God being the universe, source, whatever you want to, the language, touch, literally reached down and touched you. And I've had several experiences like that in my life. And one of them was when I was just divinely guided, intuitively guided, and doing things that didn't necessarily, I wasn't attached to why am I doing this? What is this about? I was just in the flow and receiving the information and acting on it. And then it just all came together in this magical kind of glorious experience. And so one of the first things I want to say is you need to activate, right? You need to set an intention. Okay, so you're in charge of marketing, you're in charge of sales, you're in charge of, you know, I mean, those are kind of the big ones, I think, that,
Yeah.
that you is in terms of sending your vibration out there. But then being open to receiving, because you're the one that needs to take action. You're the one who is in the physical 3D realm. So your metaphysical team, and you can even imagine you've got like a table, right? You've got like director of marketing, director, of sales, you've got like client fulfillment, you've got content creation, like whatever those roles are. And then you can direct and ask those metaphysical guides, beings, whatever you want to call them, to this is what I would love, or this is what I'm directing you to do. This is the intention I'm setting. But then you've got to be open to receiving the guidance from them.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where sometimes the block is, right? Is that we get those, and we've talked about this with intuition as well. So you want to like really be accessing your intuition to receive the messages and the guidance, and then you got to act on it, even if you don't know why, even if it doesn't make sense in your mind in the 3D world. You need to act on it, because when you do that, you're starting to build a stronger relationship, right? And you don't necessarily know what the impact of that action is going to be. So, I had another podcast, and it was just a kind of an intuitive, like, oh, I'd love to start a podcast, and I'd love it to be like a top 10. And, I had it on my vision board. And so I did it. I just acted on it, and it just like unfolded beautifully. Right. And it was a great source of finding clients and finding people who are really connected with what I had to say and how I worked. And
you and I ended up connecting more clearly based on that podcast, because we traded podcast episodes, and
Yeah, exactly. So, and then it actually did become a top 10 podcast. I wasn't even monitoring it. It was just an intention that had been set. And then I found a way of tracking your podcast, and it was. So it starts with what would I love, always starts with what would I love, the vision. So important, because that's your soul's, guidance. It's a GPS. And then you can set that intention for your metaphysical team. Okay, you're in charge of this department, this department, this department, with the knowingness that this team then is tapped into the quantum field, and the quantum field has all of the information, and the information that we can't possibly comprehend in our physical form. So there's a trust there that you need to have in terms of knowing that there is, I don't want to say a plan, but there's like things are unfolding in ways that we can't maybe quite see or understand just yet. So you set that intention, and you set those roles, and then you ask for that guidance.
Yeah. And I want to come back to something you just said, which is trust, right? So the worst decisions I have ever made in my business came from places of desperation, exhaustion, burnout, and lack of trust, right?
Yeah.
I can point to every single bad money decision I ever made, every bad purchase, every bad hire, everything as a moment of I was either burned out, or I was in confusion and desperation, and I was just going, just fix it for me, right? I was hiring somebody out of helplessness instead of out of power, right?
Yeah.
And out of faith and trust.
And that's the vibration then. That's the vibration, right? So
exactly.
When you're in that energetic state, that's what you put out. You get more of it. It just comes amplified back to you.
Absolutely.
One of the most powerful things you can do is to just be aware of your vibration, your state. Like, what are you thinking about? How are you feeling? What are you focusing on? And then if you notice that you're focusing and thinking and feeling any of those like non-desired states or ways of being, you just freaking stop yourself. Like, you put a big old like pause, right? You take your time out, and you just like get yourself solid in terms of how does the woman, the man, the person who is living the life that I'm creating, how do they feel? How do they think? What decisions do they make? Because you can't make decisions from the place you are right now. They're going to take you to the future. They're just going to keep you where you are. You need to access the vibration, the frequency of the person in the future, and then start to act and be in and do from that perspective.
Yeah. And, if you don't know how they feel, because sometimes you don't have an experience of it, right? Then you find someone that who has or is doing what you want to be doing, and ask them how they feel, right? That's a great way to get a model. But also, just to get yourself clear, you go back to your trust in the universe. You go back to your "what would I love" question, right? Because a lot of the waffling and the angst and the upset and the "I don't know which way to go, I don't know what to do" is the lack of clarity is a function of not asking yourself what you would love, but instead saying, "Well, what can I do? What will people pay for?"
Right. And what do I think is possible?
Exactly. What do I think is possible? What will people pay for?
Yeah.
Will they pay that much? Don't ask those questions, right? I know that traditional business says to do that, but that is just there's a balance to be had, right? So if you are looking at a market and they have zero money, then yeah, that's probably not your best choice to make that your target market.
There's like a time and a place, right? Like there's a time and a place to do market analysis and the SWOTs and all that kind of stuff. But if you start there, you're always going to be limited. You're always going to be limited. You're never going to be called to be greater than who you currently are.
Yes. And so you want to come back to what would I love? What would I love? What would I love? And, I've recently been doing that for myself too. And I am going to be moving to doing more retreats because I just loved having everybody here. It's the most lit up I've been in a couple of years. Now, part of that was because I was burned out from the move, because the move was insane, the pandemic and then the move. But part of it is just because I love to work in person. Right? I love to work in person. And so I'm going to be moving to a more heavily retreat-based model because it just made me happy, right? So there's clarity there. When you have clarity, when you know what makes you happy, when you know what you're excited to do, then it's easier, one, to sell it because you're excited about it. And two, you're aligned with it energetically, which means your spirit guides are aligned with it because they're not sitting there trying to feed you what you need when you're trying to go towards what you think you're supposed to do. I want you to stay away from the word "supposed to" because that is all about somebody else and not about you. And you are meant to be the fullest expression of your authentic self. And that means what lights you up is what you're meant to do. So,
and I think so often we have been conditioned to look to circumstances for permission.
Yes.
Start to ask the question, what would I love? There's this kind of opening up that starts to happen. And then we think like, well, what does my bank account say? Or, what is my education? Or what is past experience? Or what is my health? Or, we start to put these limitations on ourselves. And so the work there, the opportunity is just to start to notice that. Right.
Yeah.
And so what would I love? And then when you start to, and you're gonna, because this is just how we're wired, right? And it's not that you're doing it wrong. It's just you're a human being. Congratulations. High five. So when you start to notice that you're starting to kind of like dim yourself or limit or lower based on what you think is possible, ask yourself the question, well, what if I could? Like, what if it was possible?
Yeah.
What if it could really happen?
Because we tend to do the opposite, right? We're like, well, what if it doesn't work? That's where our brains tend to go is what if it doesn't? What if it doesn't? But what if it does?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. What if it does? Put energy into the thing you want. What was it? Worrying. I just heard this phrase and I don't know where it came from, but it was worrying is worshiping the problem, which I love, right? That's a great phrase.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I love that. And you don't want to worship your problems. What you focus on expands, right? If you've got your nose right up against your problem, you won't be able to see a way around it.
No.
But if you pull yourself back from the problem and focus on the goal, then you're going to see a way around, over, under, through the problem.
Well, and here's the
you're not
thing too,
attached to it.
Yeah. And you might not see it, but this is where your metaphysical team comes in.
Yes.
Is that you can then, and it's not like you give it over and you say like, okay, well, my work here is done. I'm just going to sit and watch Netflix and wait for an insight, right? Like you gotta do your part here too, but you can ask for guidance from your team.
Yeah.
But
I want to talk about receiving that guidance because, I want you to feel into the energy. So, there's going to be a lot of different inputs, right? I get probably 50, 100 emails a day, right? And, 80% of them are people trying to sell me a service, right? And so when you are looking at this and you're asking your guides for a direction, then these multitude of people trying to sell you services could feel like, your guide saying, oh, well, this is the right one, except that that's not necessarily true, right? So how do you discern random spam from a guided thing, right? And so the first thing I'm going to say is check your energy. If you go into a place where you look at something and go, oh, thank God, somebody else is going to figure it out for me, that is not the right path.
Sorry.
Yeah, that ain't it, right?
Yeah.
If you go into, oh, I don't understand this, I don't know, I can't even hire somebody because I don't know which way I'm going. No, that's not the right path either, right? The key is to, especially if you're looking for clarity, it's never going to be buying a service initially, right? Or almost never, right? It's more going to be the universe handing you different things, and people often miss the messages, and it's because they come in ways that people don't recognize are messages. So like I used to get my messages through songs that would randomly pop into my head in the morning, right? You can get it from some random comment of some stranger as you're walking by on the street and you just hear a snippet of conversation. That could be it. It could be a billboard that you drive by. It could be a piece of email that comes in and gives you some insight. It could be, a friend talking about something, or a social media post that you see or something. But these things come in a variety of different ways. And this is why it's so important to cultivate presence in your life, is because if you're not present in the moment, you're going to miss all of these things because you're not paying attention. Your guides are talking to you every day, all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
All the time. Yeah.
So you've got to be in a position to be able to receive the information. And so, cultivating a meditation practice or a conversation practice is usually more how I look at it. Is I sit and talk with my guides, whereas meditation is clearing your mind and allowing yourself to be still. This is a practice of conversing with your guides and having that conversation.
And free writing can be really good for that too.
Yeah. Free writing is great for that. Journaling is great for that. Just tapping in and asking questions, writing down the question and waiting for the answer sort of thing, right? Yeah. All of those things are good pathways to get information from your guides. And then the other thing I would say is that when you're looking for clarity, when you are confused about the path to go, don't try to get to the answers so quickly. We think, oh, there's one answer and I want it to come in. No, they're going to give you like 8 or 10 or 20 different things that are going to come in. I want you to just sit and percolate in it. Give yourself a couple of months to find your clarity, right? We're not talking a day. We're not talking a week. We're talking a few months, 2 or 3 months that'll take for all of the information to come in, for it to integrate into your body, for it to settle in your system and allow you to find your clarity. And for those of you who are like me, and my brain likes to go, 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 you got to slow down. You got to allow it to sit. And if your brain needs to go, 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 well, give it some what ifs to play with. What if this and what if that? Would I love this? Would I love that? Play on the different pathways, but commit to nothing, right? Commit to nothing until it all settles out, right? I have a tendency to make things as complicated as possible because I love the thought processes of putting all the systems in place. And what I am focusing on right now is simplicity. I'm like, okay, how do I make this as easy as possible, as least complicated as possible, and as easeful as possible? And, part of the reason why we do that is because it's trauma brain, right? Trauma brain says stay busy so you're not aware of your pain.
Well, and also just the human brain, right? Like in terms of how we were wired to survive,
right?
Our brain wants to like pick at something, like training and practice to calm it down.
Yeah,
but it's safe to be calm.
Yeah, and trauma makes that worse, right? So if you had childhood trauma or any trauma, that your brain is just going to be wanting to like think, so it doesn't have to feel.
Hypervigilance,
it's super hypervigilance. Yeah. But I've done a huge amount of work, and I'm no longer in that place where if my brain goes quiet, all of my shit comes up, right? because I've worked all my shit, right? Not all of it, but I'm still working it. But that 90% of my shit has been dealt with. And so I don't have these feelings of that come up when the stillness happens. And yet my brain is still trained to do that. And so I am actively untraining that process because it doesn't serve a purpose in my life anymore. Right? And so that's the piece that you have to recognize, is that your brain is going la 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 la, so that you don't feel things. And if you are one of those people that the comes up when your brain goes still, you're not going to be able to untrain that until you deal with the because there's a benefit to avoiding it, right? There's a benefit to participating in it, I should say, because you're avoiding.
It serves a purpose. It serves a purpose for you.
It serves a purpose, right?
Everything we do is serving a purpose for us in some way. And as we evolve and as we grow, some of those things are no longer efficient. We can let them go. But because they're a habit, it can take some work and some practice to learn how to let them go or evolve them or grow them along with us.
Yeah. And I will say that the vagus nerve reset is super helpful for starting the process of unwiring this particular process in your brain, right? So coming back to spirit guides,
yes, I was going to say, let's
wandering
come back
afield, but it's all relevant and important and connected, right? Because your energy is going to impact how you receive or don't receive the energy from your guides. That is just the nature of the beast.
And so just one thing I just want to say before we wrap this up is, if you are still in, and we're all still in practice mode, but if you're feeling like, oh, I've got too much going on, my brain is too active, I'm not going to get the messages, like, it's okay, you are going to get the messages, right? So all you need to do is just set that intention and just start to notice. So it's not like you have to get to a certain point before it's going to come to you. It's a process of practicing. So wherever you are right now is the right and perfect place to start to grow and in some cases develop this relationship, because your spirit guides are all there. Your metaphysical team is there. It's waiting for you, right? They're there to support you.
Well, and a way to connect to be able to receive them, even if you're still in this Mode, right, is to work on your presence. Yeah. And so I've just decided in this moment, because I didn't realize we'd get to this, but I've just decided I'm going to gift you guys with a copy of my presence practice class that I have online. And because I think that that's super important for doing this work. And so there will be a link in the show notes to get access to that class for free. There'll be a coupon code so that you can get that class for free, because I feel like it's so important for you to have that if you're going to be able to receive the messages from your guides. And presence practice is absolutely not the same thing as meditation. I want to make that very clear. It is not at all the same thing. And so this is a different type of way of being that will allow you to bring yourself into the present moment. And that way you will be more available to receive information, because you're going to be more present in the space to notice when it shows up. Okay. So I will put that in the show notes for you guys so that you have that. And I think that we can call that good for today, right?
That we're like way over our.
We are way over time, but we had so much to say.
Thanks for hanging in, guys. Thanks for hanging in.
All right. Thanks for hanging in, and we will see you next time. And don't forget, what you focus on expands, what you intend is what you create. So choose wisely.
So that's it for today's episode of Spirit Guides Podcast. Head on over to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen and subscribe to the show. Every week, one lucky listener who subscribes and posts a review on iTunes will be entered into a drawing for a $10,000 value grand prize and a private reading with Kelle Sparta herself. Be sure to head on over to spiritguidespodcast.com and pick up a free copy of Kelle's gift and join us on the next episode.